Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let's talk money for a moment. Now, Chris Rock, great comedian, right, has a monologue where he talks about being a successful comedian. He's talking about the gap between blacks and non-blacks when it comes to wealth, right? And he talked about how he was doing all right as a comedian, right? He was going before sellout shows and doing a lot of things to generate revenue. And when he made it, he moved into a neighborhood where his next door neighbor, who didn't have the fame that Chris Rock had, was a dentist. And the point of Chris Rock is, look, just because you're high profile doesn't mean you're making the money that someone who is lower profile is making, right? The dentist, his neighbor, was in the same neighborhood as him, right? Same zip code. Right? The mailman, I'm sure, didn't have to go that far from Chris Rock's house to the neighbor's house to deliver the neighbor's mail. But yet, you know, the neighbor had as much money as Chris Rock, basically. Let me give you another story. This one's a little bit more personal. More than 20 years ago, I was hanging out with a guy, really good guy, Josh Lieberman, who is an agent in Hollywood. Right? He's represented some people who've won Oscars. And Josh was feeling sorry for himself one night. Back then, he was just starting out. And he started talking about how, you know, he would make more money, quite frankly, if he were a local real estate agent selling real estate than he was as a Hollywood agent. Even though we view Hollywood agents as the ultimate insiders, people with access, people who know stars. Now, I've long here said online that boxing doesn't have as much money as you think, right? There are a lot of fighters, including the fighter Bernard Hopkins is about to fight, who literally have kept their day jobs, right? Kept their day jobs while they've pursued a boxing career. Because the boxing career, even when they're ranked, doesn't pay enough to pay the bills. So, for example, there's a guy who recently beat Robert the Ghost Guerrero. And the question after the fight was whether he was going to give up his day job to pursue boxing full time. Right? These are guys who are in the ring with Robert the Ghost Guerrero. Right? Think about it. So there's an illusion out there. We'll call it the pay-per-view illusion. Right? We hear about pay-per-view numbers, you know, from certain fighters. Right? You know the cash cows in the sport. Right? Any established heavyweight champion. Right? Vladimir Klitschko. People like Manny Pacquiao, Saul Alvarez, Floyd Mayweather, Mike Tyson, Oscar De La Hoya, right? We hear their numbers and we think that pay-per-view by itself is a cash cow. That if elite fighters, guys who are highly skilled, have a fight on pay-per-view, they're going to make millions of dollars, right? Millions of dollars. Now, is that true? I'll tell you what, YouTube Nation, you tell me, you tell the world. If you would spend $69.99 on a pay-per-view event for Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, unbeaten fighter, one of the sport's best pound for pound, let's say he's matched up against a tough opponent. How many of you are going to spend the $69.99? Right? Terrence Crawford fought Victor Postal in Las Vegas. Folks, that pay-per-view, well, you can research the numbers. For the talent levels of the fighters, right? That pay-per-view, let's just say, has you wondering if it made any profits. So, years ago, Floyd Mayweather was with Bob Arum. Bob Arum was his promoter. Understand, Bob Arum has been in the game from before I started following boxing. I can tell you, when I was a kid in the 70s, Bob Arum was one of the heavyweights in the promotion business. Right? Bob Arum's been an A-level promoter literally for decades. Well, Mayweather was a little bit surprised because understand the fighter's perspective. Mayweather sensed that he was one of the very best in boxing pound for pound, if not the best. Right? Understand, Mayweather, when he entered the ring to fight champion Genaro Hernandez, was actually wearing championship gear. Right? Because Mayweather felt he was a champion as he entered the ring, even as he fought for his first championship. So Mayweather thought he was top-notch. And Mayweather looked at guys making big pay-per-view money, and Mayweather thought, you got to be kidding. Why isn't Bob Arum shining the spotlight on me in pay-per-view fights? Right? Well, understand, even with an elite talent like Floyd Mayweather, who would later become pay-per-view gold, right? People need to understand it wasn't until Mayweather fought Oscar De La Hoya, who was at the time the pay-per-view king, that he became pay-per-view gold. It didn't happen before then. Even with an elite talent like Floyd Mayweather and an elite experienced promoter like Bob Arum, Bob was reluctant to put Floyd on pay-per-view because there was a risk that the promotion might lose money. Right? So that brings us to Andre Ward against Sergey Kovalev, in a fight that really legitimately could say the winner of this fight is going to be the best fighter in the sport pound for pound. Right? Now, whether you agree with that or not, let's all concede that in terms of the pound for pound rankings, Andre Ward and Sergey Kovalev are certainly on the very short list. Understand how big this fight was. Both guys were unbeaten going into the fight. Where was the fight? It was in Las Vegas. Right? Think it through. At the new T-Mobile Arena, I believe. Right? So this fight had a lot going on for it. But again, pay-per-view is an illusion. Neither Ward nor Kovalev had proven themselves to be a pay-per-view draw. Right? Neither had. Right? The pay-per-view draw list, gee, of the current fighters, who's on it? Right? I mentioned a bunch of names earlier. Miguel Cotto belongs on the list. Right? Canelo, Pacquiao. Folks, you're really looking at one hand when you're trying to figure out the pay-per-view guys with track records. So, the fight only got, according to reports, a little bit more than 160,000 pay-per-view buys. Now, when you're at an event, people who think financially understand that somebody is out of pocket. Right? Someone is out of pocket. A venture's either gonna make money, break even, or lose money. Right? Someone is out of pocket. Now you hope the people who are out of pocket are just the consumers who expect it to be out of pocket, right? I pay $69.99 for a high definition feed of the fight. You know, I'm expecting to be out $69.99, right? I've made that decision. No one's put a gun to my head. I've understood this is the price for admission, right? In a good event that makes money, right? You hope that the only people out of pocket are the people who want to be out of pocket, right? I've paid $1,000 for a close seat to the ring. I knew I'd be out of pocket. I'm out of pocket $1,000. But understand, the promoter knows, and promoters are a unique bunch, that it's the penthouse or it's the outhouse for them, right? Either the amount of people who have paid the pay-per-view price or have paid for their in-arena seat exceed the costs, the out-of-pocket costs for the promoter, or they don't, right? Let's add in the money you're getting from advertisers. Let's add in the site fee you're getting from the venue, right? If the venue is some casino that wants you to know that this fight is coming live from, plug in the name of the casino, right? Promoters understand it's hit, break even, or miss, right? Here, let's just say, given the guarantees to the fighters, the promoters in a fight involving legitimately two of the very best in the sport, the promoters didn't do well, right? As you were watching this fight and you knew you were out of pocket, just understand some other people are also out of pocket. The difference between the public and them is that the public's out of pocket the price for the event, right? $69.99 for the pay-per-view. The promoters here would have been better off with the event not taking place, right? Because the event didn't generate the revenue to compensate the promoters for the risk involved, right? So, all I can say is people need to understand this is structural in boxing. There are many stars in the sport from a boxing perspective, right? They're great fighters in multiple divisions, right? Andre Ward's a great fighter. Golovkin's a great fighter. Terrence Crawford's a great fighter. I would consider Mikey Garcia to be a great fighter, right? You know, Keith Thurman might be a great fighter. We're finding out as he fights. Deshaun Porter's next up, Danny Garcia, right? Roman Gonzalez is a great fighter. But not every great fighter is a box office draw, right? Those guys really are few and far between. Let me just offer unsolicited advice to a fighter. If you're a great fighter but not a great box office draw, and you get offered a fight against a box office draw, right? Pacquiao, Canelo, right? My advice to you is to take the fight. Tell your manager, look, be tough, go in there, you know, fight for me. But if at the end of the day they tell you, look, man, you're not going to get this fight unless you agree to some amount that, let's say, doesn't fully compensate you for the amount the event's taking in. Let's say the promoter says, look, you want to fight Vladimir Klitschko, I want you to accept $1 million or $500,000. And you know the event is going to be much bigger than that. My advice to you is to take the money. take the money, take the fight. Understand, in boxing, you really don't get paid for the fight you're in. You get paid for your last fight. Right? Nothing helps a fighter's career more financially than beating a cash cow. Right? Nothing propelled Floyd Mayweather more, quite frankly, financially, than beating Oscar De La Hoya. After that fight, he became a superstar. Let me point out too, and people know this, right? The flaws make the diamond. Some of these guys who are box office gold, even their supporters know, have holes in their game. That's what makes them compelling. So, Ricky Hatton supporters, they knew Ricky needed to fight you on the inside. He needed to smother you. He wasn't gonna fight you on his back foot. You saw Ricky Hatton getting hit with shots. Even his supporters knew. He wasn't Pernell Whitaker defensively. Right? You saw Ricky Hatton's face with red marks on it in fights. Right? You knew. You know, it was a shootout. It wasn't surgical. But yet Ricky Hatton was that rare athlete who could cross the Atlantic Ocean and bring thousands of fans with him. Right? So if you were a fighter and they came to you and said, hey, the Ricky Hatton people want to fight you for $300,000, your response should be, tell them yes. You know, you should tell your manager, look, go in there, ask for $500,000. If they say no, 3 or nothing, fold. Take it. Because if you beat Ricky Hatton and impress his crowd, his fans, maybe they follow you to your next pay-per-view event. Let me also say this too. That doesn't always hold, does it? Right? If your girlfriend loved her last boyfriend, right, and something happens to the two of them, and you're the next guy to date her, that doesn't mean she's going to love you like she loved him. Right? This is a cold reality world we live in. Right? So fighters need to understand, especially defensively blessed fighters, that their styles might not translate with fans who prefer Ricky Hatton offensive blood and guts fighters. Right? So, let's just say I know the promoters for the Ward-Kovalev fight were hoping for more than 160,000 pay-per-view buys. Don't buy the comments, buy the math. Right? Every promoter, after an event, says, oh, we're satisfied with the crowd. We can't wait to do this again. We're thrilled. This pay-per-view buy rate was more than we expected. They always say that. Right? Don't believe them. Do the math yourself. If one fighter is guaranteed $5 million, and if the other fighter is guaranteed $2 million, and if the pay-per-view comes in at $160,000, and you know the highest price paid for the high-definition feed by a pay-per-view consumer was $69.95, just do the math and figure out whether or not the promoters made a profit, understanding that there are also other costs involved, like security at the event, like paying the fighters on the undercard, right? Like paying the regulatory fees, because of course boxing has boxing commissions, right? And these guys aren't working for free, folks, right? So just figure it out. All right, let's shift gears. You know, I have a red cup with me. This is kind of like a red flag, right? Or a red card, whatever it's called. This is my red cup. And today's Red Cup winner is Kevin Barry. Right? Excellent trainer. He's a trainer of Joseph Parker. Right? But we're giving him a Red Cup anyway, and he's earned this Red Cup. Folks, if you want to know who an underdog is in an event, right, you need to ask the casino. Right? The sports book at the casino can tell you who the underdog is. Right? When you go to place a bet on a sporting event, you don't tell the guy taking the bet at the casino who the underdog is. They tell you. Right? This isn't a subjective thing. It's objective. Somebody's the favorite in a sporting event. Somebody's the underdog. Now, if you go to casinos in Las Vegas right now, you're going to find that Joseph Parker is a 4-1 favorite at least over Andy Ruiz. Something like a 4-1 favorite. Now let's do the math. As I said, believe the math. Let's do the math. 4-1 means that the casino's telling you that if these guys fought 5 times, Joseph Parker wins 4 out of the 5. Right? That's called a prohibitive favorite. That's a big favorite. Well, Kevin Barry is trying to convince the press that his fighter's the underdog. Look, if that's the case, if that's remotely true, can somebody please tell this gambler who's already bet on this fight the names of the casinos that have Parker listed as the underdog so I can hedge my play? Right? Please do so in the comment section to this video. I'm suspecting there won't be one name of any casino, anywhere in the world that has unbeaten Joseph Parker as the underdog in this fight. Not one. Well, let me say this. The value, given that these two fighters really are evenly matched, aren't they? The value's clearly with the real underdog here, Andy Ruiz. Right? Understand, value depends on the odds being offered. I'm just telling you, based on my own research, right, that Joseph Parker's the big favorite. Right? Who do you think is the favorite? Right? So let's get past the misinformation here. If you feel that these fighters are close, your money, just from a value perspective, needs to be on Andy Ruiz. Let me go one step further. I know Joseph Parker in interviews, as I said, the misinformation is crazy, is claiming that he's faster than Andy Ruiz. Right, okay, right. I'm just telling you that Andy Ruiz might have the fastest hands in the heavyweight division. Right? So when you're dealing with a fight where a guy has faster hands than the other guy, right, you need to think to yourself, you know what, there's a possibility here that if this fight goes the distance, Joseph Parker loses. Right? Because he's fighting a combination puncher who's gonna throw punches in bunches. Right? So for me, given that Andy Ruiz is the big underdog, and given that I'm looking for value, given that Andy Ruiz is also unbeaten, given that I feel he has the faster hands, given that the guys have sparred already together, so Ruiz isn't going to be that thrown by Parker's gifts. Right? I believe the play is, as I've said in an earlier video, Andy Ruiz to win the fight. Folks, you're getting much better than even money odds on Ruiz. Andy Ruiz, the real underdog, to win the fight, at least the underdog where it counts in my opinion, and that's at the casino. Right? It's Andy Ruiz to win the fight, hedged with Parker by KO. Parker does have a punch. Parker has a very impressive knockout percentage. Look at the end of his Dimitrenko fight, right? Dimitrenko looks like he's been hit by a bus, not a car. Right? Let me say this. Just a few more thoughts on the fight. The fight's dangerous. For those of you who play basketball, have you ever played with a guy who, he's on your team, and you notice that this guy's a great shooter? Right? The guy's hitting shots. You're looking around, you're thinking, oh, this dude's practically Steph Curry out here. He's a better shooter than anybody else on the team. And then during the game, you pass the ball to him, and for whatever reason, the guy's not shooting the ball. The guy's passing it around, right? You want to take the guy aside and say, player, look, man, don't worry about being a ball hog here. Save our team. Help us win this game. We need these points. You want the guy to pull the trigger more, but the guy doesn't quite seem to understand his talent level. That's Joseph Parker, isn't it? Right? I'm telling you, Parker has one of the better jabs in the heavyweight division. He can double and triple the jab. It's like a sledgehammer. You watch a Parker fight, he might not throw that jab for several rounds. Right? I'm looking at Parker against Carlos Takam, a fight, by the way, I personally feel he lost. During that fight, you're waiting for Parker to open up on Takam. You're looking down on your scorecard and you're saying, man, this fight is close. Somebody's got to step up here in this fight. Now, oddly enough, that's that rare fight where neither guy stepped up. Right? I had no idea why Takam kept taking his foot off the gas, and I had no idea how Parker could have been so certain that he was winning the fight. Right? So I view Parker as the young guy. Right? He's not only young in terms of the calendar. He's a young guy who doesn't quite fully know the tools he has. Right? Great jab that he doesn't use. Right? Back foot game that you only see when he's in trouble against a guy like Carlos Takam. Right? No sense of urgency. Right? There's no, I got to draw a line in the sand here. Carlos Takam has done some things here. I need to make sure the judges know that I'm still in this fight. None of that. So, to me, it's a dangerous fight. Dangerous. Right? If Joseph Parker shows up with his A game, wow. If Joseph Parker figures out that Andy Ruiz, who he sparred with, doesn't have a back foot game, wow. Let me say this too. The guys think differently. Right? I was watching Rocky 3 the other day. And wow, those guys, nobody believed in a combination. It's like Rocky's a mid-range hooker, Clubber Lang's a mid-range hooker, at least for their first fight, right? Rocky figures out there's more to boxing than mid-range hooking after he trains with Apollo Creed. But, both guys are just one power shot, then the next power shot. One power shot, then the next power shot. Right? Folks, combination punchers think differently. Right? Think Ray Leonard. Right? The combination is up and down at times. They're tucking power shots in the middle of the combination. Right? Hand speed isn't just the ability to throw your hands fast. Hand speed is also the ability to think fast while you're throwing your hands and making adjustments. That's Andy Ruiz. Right? For a glimpse of Andy Ruiz's hand speed, look at the Joe Hanks film. I believe that's the most impressive fight either of these two guys has had. Now, the thing that worries me with Andy Ruiz is I'm one of those guys who believes that you tinker with the little things and pretty soon the big things start falling apart. Right? Andy Ruiz is a naturally big man. It worries me when I'm hearing people like Abel Sanchez say, he trained with me for a few weeks and we had him losing several pounds. You know what? Andy Ruiz at his natural weight's a damn good fighter. Right? Him losing weight, sometimes that extra meat down here helps you absorb punches. So, let's just say this Joseph Parker-Andy Ruiz fight, that's a good fight. Because the casino is giving the underdog significant odds. That's the value side of the play, and the underdog, sorry Kevin Barry, but the underdog is actually Andy Ruiz. Right? If you're just looking for one value play, I believe the Ruiz side is the side to be on. Right? If you're a hedge bettor, and I'm a hedge guy, right, there have been many nights where my top play failed and the hedge has saved me. Right? Because of the odds you're getting on Andy Ruiz, I believe your hedge should be Ruiz simply to win, hedged with Parker by KO. That's how I see the fight. Understand too, I know Parker officially beat Carlos Takam. I'm one of those people, and I know logistically people will tell you, hey, the scoring in one fight doesn't affect the scoring in the other fight. I've watched the game of boxing long enough to know that sooner or later a fighter who gets close decisions is not going to get the benefit of the doubt from some judges. Right? I'm just telling you, Oscar De La Hoya, you know, that second Shane Mosley fight, come on now. Right? The Felix Trinidad fight, where De La Hoya is clearly ahead, then they go to the last few rounds. Now, I agree, De La Hoya is moving away from Trinidad. I agree with that 100%. But you can't tell me that the perception that Oscar De La Hoya hadn't gotten some gift decisions against people like Pernell Whitaker didn't factor into the judges' scoring. I think there are many people who support Joseph Parker who privately know that Carlos Takam fight was a hell of a lot closer than the scorecard suggested. Right? I'm just telling you, if Andy Ruiz flashes the Ray Leonard type of hand speed that I've seen him flash in some fights, right, the judges are going to be hard pressed, especially since this fight is for a heavyweight title, to give that title to Joseph Parker. So this fight does have a live underdog. It's Andy Ruiz, the real underdog. The hedge is Parker by KO. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.